Welcome, everybody. This is Edgardo, Balentine.
And this is DiGregorio. And welcome to the Real Estate of Tomorrow podcast, where we're going to discuss the rapidly changing landscape of the real estate industry.
And the steps that you need to take today in order to survive tomorrow.
Look, I'm going to give you the perspective of a 25-year veteran, somebody who has been there and done that.
Which is a slide for all part, okay?
That's for you, man.
Look, I'm going to give you a fresh perspective from somebody that's applying those steps today.
So that basically means you're young and you don't know shit.
All right. Let's get this started.
Hold on a second. Before you listen to this, when we look back at this episode, we maybe came across like assholes.
Look, we might have, but we deliberately recorded it this way and we didn't pull any punches because the public doesn't pull punches.
So keep that in mind and remember we love you.
We do. Let's roll.
Hey, everybody, this is Edgardo Balentine, and I'm with DiGregorio on today's episode of Real Estate of Tomorrow podcast, which is...
It's the non-BS podcast for
Let's say
you.
Bullshit.
The non-bullshit podcast for you, the realtor of tomorrow. And we're going to talk about all the things that you need to do today. And you're going to get it from two vastly different perspectives. I'm a millennial. I'm an immigrant. And I'm in the business kicking some ass in the mortgage business.
For a couple of years.
For a couple of years, more than two. And you?
I am not an immigrant. I am not a millennial. And I've been doing this about 25 years.
He's old, people.
Old.
He is old.
Old people in the house. All right.
All right, so what are we going to talk about today? Let's
listen,
just jump in. It's a big podcast today. What's going on?
Bro, we got to talk about this lawsuit, man. There is a lawsuit going on that can literally change the face of real estate. And what I want to do is I want to lay out what the lawsuit is. And then at the end, I want to talk about NAR's response to it, because I think a lot of people will be surprised to hear what their response has been and then kind of what the take is on their response.
All right, so a couple things we need to understand. The lawsuit is being brought on by some powerhouses in the lawsuit, the actual class action lawsuit industry.
Right.
So these are big firms. These big firms have mad creds,
yes,
I would say, right? They have taken tobacco. They have taken Toyota. They took Exxon with the whole spill thing.
They took Apple. I mean, billions and billions of dollars in their war chest. And look, let's talk about the premise of the lawsuit. Okay.
Yeah.
Look, it's an antitrust violation, right? Which is the anti-monopoly laws in America. And basically it says this. It says, hey, if you're a real estate agent, you're going to join a broker. The broker is going to force you to join the board. The board's going to force you to join the MLS. And the MLS, when you list homes on the MLS, it's going to force you to share your commission with the agent on the other side of things. And that right there is the real premise of the lawsuit. They're saying that the fact that sellers, if I was selling my house, that I don't have a say in the matter as to how much I pay for a commission split, and you know, not to mention just how screwed up that is from one angle, that is an antitrust violation. And look, you know, like you said, these lawyers are real. They're not going to bring forth a frivolous bullshit lawsuit. The lawsuit has some legs behind it.
And because there's so much money, and we're going to get into that it's not, these are not the type of lawyers that will probably settle a case like this. So like he's saying, the problem that we have here is specifically with the buyer broker commission rule from NAR. And the buyer broker commission rule just tells you that if you list a house in the MLS, which the premise is in order to successfully sell a home, you have to list it in the MLS. So there's a little monopoly there. If you list a home in the MLS, you have to put how much money the buyer's broker it's going to make. And that's unilateral and it's non-negotiable. And on top of that, the code of ethics from NAR says that you cannot put up an offer as a buyer agent. You cannot put up an offer that it's contingent upon the terms of the listing agreement, which in turn makes you, the seller, pay for the party that's going against you if you want to sell your house.
Yeah, and you know, like you never think about that. So like the verbiage from the actual lawsuit, it says the defendants have been, quote, in quotes, conspiring to require home sellers to pay the broker representing the buyer of their homes and to pay added inflated amounts in violation of federal antitrust laws. This conspiracy, and conspiracy just means a kind of agreement, a widespread agreement. The conspiracy has saddled home sellers with a cost that would be borne by the buyer in a competitive market. And dude, that's big. Now, you know, I never even thought about it until I read the lawsuit. Okay. Like, it's so funny. Haven't been in the business for so long. Shit just is the way it is. Like, I don't give it a lot of thought, but the concept that I, as a seller, am going to pay a buyer's agent whose job it is to talk me down on the price of my house as much as possible is kind of a screwed up thing. And again,
You're
I just never
funding
thought
the
about
competition.
it. Absolutely.
That's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, they're the other side of the transaction, and their interest and my interest are in complete opposites of one another.
So they're saying a couple of things. They're saying, number one, in a real free market, in a competitive market, this wouldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
In a competitive market, if it were to happen, then the seller would pay for a lesser commission. It wouldn't pay 5 or 6% like it's the norm right now because the seller is overpaying. And the problem that they have is like, okay, if the seller today doesn't want to pay for that much, if the seller today just wants to pay for the listing agent and not necessarily for the buyer's agent, then the buyer's agent, because of NAR rules, is not allowed to put it in the MLS and therefore is not allowed to really promote properly that listing.
Absolutely. And look, I got an article here written by a guy named Robert Hahn, who's a
punch in the face.
Yeah, punch in the face to him. We have a real estate consulting firm, and listen to what he says. He said, "I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that this case can be a nuclear bomb on the industry. If the court rules in favor of the plaintiffs here, realtor associations evaporate, the MLS likely dies off, and the entire infrastructure of residential real estate in the United States has to be remade." Holy shit.
That's real.
Now look, who the hell knows? Okay. These lawsuits take a long time. Right. Okay. And who the hell knows what happens, but the potential of this is real. I mean, this is not some like kind of frivolous thing. And look, the dollar figure of the lawsuit is staggering, right? So check it out. If you figure an average sales price in America, $300,000, the 3% commission, which is usually the average commission is about 6%, so this is half. So 3% is what's in question. That's $9,000. According to law, antitrust violations allow for treble damages, meaning triple. So a $9,000 commission is liable for $27,000 in penalties. Multiply that by 2 million transactions, and we're looking at a $56 billion lawsuit. And going back to what you said earlier about the settlement, one, these lawyers have no history of that, and two, what are you going to settle for? 10 billion, 20 billion? They don't have the freaking money. They can't afford that. So this goes all the way.
And look, we know it's no joke when the defendants, the other side of this lawsuit, it's just the biggest names in real estate.
Absolutely.
I mean, I didn't even know this, but they went against Reology Holdings, which is the owner of Better Homes and Gardens, Century 21, Coldwell Banker, Sotheby's, and a couple more. They went against Berkshire Hathaway, Keller Williams, who else? Remax, NAR, and the 20 biggest MLSs in the country. They went against everybody. These guys are not holding punches. And if you actually take yourself away, we're in the industry, we love realtors. Okay, if we separate ourselves and just listen to the argument, I'm not saying that the argument it's an absolute truth, but the argument makes sense. It makes sense that right now it is very likely that if you put an offer, if you put a listing in the MLS paying only 1% commission to the buyer's agent is probably not going to sell that house, not going to show the house to their clients, at least not first.
And look, technically that's an ethics violation, but look, let's screw all that. Let's talk reality. It's insane to think, it's silly to think that never comes into play at all. And that does validate this lawsuit.
It does. It absolutely does.
It's interesting. And look, if you look at what technology has changed, right? Technology is just getting into the real estate lending industries, and a lot of people don't understand why, but when the internet got big in the late 90s, and around the time that technology was really exploding, the Great Recession and the housing bust happened. And because of that, there haven't been any radical changes in the real estate industry, but it's coming. And it's interesting when you talk to real estate agents, completely without research, they just dismiss it. Oh yeah, they've been coming after us for years. It never holds. We have great lobbying powers.
They have a power for lobbying power.
Which does what for this?
Nothing.
But
the problem with that is you get used to that.
Yes.
And just like the taxi industry, just like the hotel industry is going through right now, just like all these other industries are getting very, very disrupted. And this is the thing. You touch on this. the real estate industry as the corporation itself, as what we'd see as the real estate industry hasn't changed
in decades.
But the behavior of the consumer already changed. And there's a big disconnect between the fact that right now, the buyer's agent is doing less than they used to do before, because right now they don't have to find the house for the client.
Right.
Most clients find their house online. So the behavior of the consumer,
statistically proven.
yeah, the behavior of the consumer already changed, but the compensation for that, let's call it lesser work, hasn't changed. So they're getting paid just as much, even though they are not doing that key part, the very, very key part, which is finding the house. The other thing that the lawsuit argues is that it says that the job that the realtor does on finding a house that's $1 million versus finding a house that's a $200,000 house, it's the same, yet they're getting paid way, way more when they find a more expensive house. But the service is the same. The
service is the same. And let me break another piece of this lawsuit down that is absolutely critical. The lawyers don't just want money. Okay. And that's the thing.
They want change.
Yeah. The lawyers do not want money. It says that the lawsuit wants damages, but more importantly, it wants the court to award the plaintiff and the class a permanent injunction under Section 16 of the Clayton Act. I have no idea what the hell that means. Enjoining defendants from continuing to require sellers to pay the buyer broker and from continuing to restrict competition amongst buyer brokers. Now, look, we got to understand, they're not just looking for money. What they're suing for is this unilateral sharing of commission arrangement to end. And going back to the earlier comments about this being a nuclear bomb in the real estate industry, that would be a nuclear freaking bomb in the real estate industry.
And think about it. Even if you were to want to pay more for your buyer's agent, right? You're not allowed. And I thought this was crazy. I just learned this when I was reading the lawsuit. The Code of Ethics of NAR says that you cannot put an offer contingent upon the negotiation of that listing agreement. You technically can, not based on the Code of Ethics, which they have to follow.
Yes.
Right? So let's just turn it around. Let's say that I want a very, very specific house that's very, very difficult for me to find. And I think that my realtor should get 4% commission because it's very specific. It's a lot of research involved. Well, I can't make that change.
Correct.
So I can drop it and I can bring it up. So another interesting point here, it says that in other countries similar to America, like England and other European countries, Canada, the commission, it's way less. And they say that based on the other countries, what they see is that the commission for America the total commission should be around 3%.
Yeah.
So the disruption is real.
The disruption's real. And just to throw some geography in here, Canada is not Europe. So just to help you out with that,
I realize that. Other countries like Canada. Thank you very much.
But look, it is 10 years ago, probably, NAR commissioned the company to do a report on the threats facing realtors, brokerages, local associations, NAR itself. And the resulting report is called the Danger Report. And in that report, they talked about commissions spiraling downward. And I think it's going to happen. And the other thing that I think comes from, and whether it's this or any of the other disruptors we're going to be talking about in this podcast, Edgardo, I think the real risk is not realtors becoming extinct. I don't think that. I do think a drastic reduction in the number of agents.
True.
All right. And let me finish my point on that. Looking back to loan officers during 2008, we went from, just here in Lee County, Florida, we went from 5,000 agents to under 100. There was a 90% reduction in loan officers in America a decade ago. So this is not an abstract concept. This can happen.
It's not becoming extinct. However, the way that realtors work right now and the value that realtors bring to the table might become extinct. And we've had this back and forth a bunch of times. And one of the things that could happen here is, yes, the commission is going to drop. There's going to be less realtors, which is actually good for the market because the actual value and the quality of the realtor is going to go up. But it could be a point where maybe both sides of the transaction will make less, or maybe one side of the transaction could disappear or could go away little by little. let's say the listing agents or the buyer's agents. I know that we have an argument here. You think that the buyer's agents are in more danger than the listing
It's the
agents.
buyer's agents.
I believe that the listing agents are in a bigger danger than the buyer's agents. The point is, things like this, things like the technologies with the iBuyers are going to disrupt the industry. And if you're not somebody that's about to retire, you really need to understand what's going on, and you really need to start making plans on how are you going to adapt and what type of value are you going to bring to the end consumer.
And look, I mean, let's talk about this just on the mortgage side of things. Like forever, all right, for 20-something years, I have been a realtor-focused lender, meaning that I focus my efforts and energy towards providing services to real estate agents. They refer their customers to me. Well, that is a dying business model. That's been a business model in lending for forever, for decades and decades and decades. But more and more consumers are getting their financing in advance. More and more consumers are showing up to the realtor's doorstep with an approval letter in hand. And the model of the realtor-based lending model is a dying model. Agents I used to get 11 loans a year from, I now get 3 because of this. So we are shifting our business to more of a consumer direct model. So in order to survive moving forward, I think you have to be aware of this, and I think you have to be thinking about how you need to pivot to change, because, you know, I would imagine people in companies like Toys R Us never thought they'd be extinct, and companies like Sears never thought they'd be on the verge of extinction. These are staples in America that are either gone or almost gone, and it's arrogant to think that that can't impact the real estate industry.
And that's the problem with every powerful organization, and NAR is one. Like you said, when we talk to our realtor partners, they laugh at lawsuits like this, and there is a danger in this, because if it's not this one, it's going to be the next one. But every single industry, it's going to be disrupted. I think that's the way it is, and I think that's capitalism at its best. You have to reinvent yourself, and you have to make sure that you're providing the best value to the consumer. And things like this, where we're opening the books here and where we're saying, okay, if we're going to be completely honest, or the lawyers are saying, if we're going to be completely honest on a completely competitive society, this wouldn't happen in this particular way. And opening that conversation, if anything, it's a danger to the way they are, the way things are right now.
Look, there were conversations with, I mean, I'm a New Yorker, and a New York City taxi cab medallion, which is your kind of license to do it, was worth over $1 million. And Gary Vee had talked about where he had spoken to some of these medallion owners and said, look, this Uber thing is real. He was basically laughed out of the room. And you could now, a handful of years later, 5 years later, buy a New York City taxi cab medallion for $100,000. Now, the last time I was in an actual cab, okay, I noticed that they now have an app where you can order your cab from the app, pay for the cab through the app, similar to an Uber thing. And my point is this: if they would have come up with that app as soon as they heard of Uber, those two things would have come up simultaneously, and it would have either saved the industry or had less of an impact. And that's the same thing as what we need to do here in the lending and real estate industries.
That's right.
Okay, now, look, let's talk about NAR's response to this, okay? What did NAR respond?
It's baseless. These are baseless accusations. It makes no sense. Like, everybody responds to a class action lawsuit.
Exactly. So NAR's statement says, the complaint misrepresents NAR's role for the operation of multiple listing services, which have long been recognized by the courts across the country as protecting consumers and creating competitive, efficient markets that benefit home buyers and sellers. And look, the facts in this case are hard to dispute. The bullet points that the lawsuit lays out are in fact policies. The question is going to be whether or not the subtle details of the case about cooperation and compensation, how they really work and how they're interpreted by the law. But there's an article here by a woman named Allie Yale.
Punch in the face,
Punch in the face to you, Allie. What's up? Where she's quoting this Han guy, and he says, I think everybody's waiting to see if these 3 lawsuits survive the motion to dismiss. If they do, the floodgates will open, which will mean way more lawsuits, way more plaintiffs, way more real estate companies being targeted. This is going to be big.
It already started. There's
Yes.
already a second lawsuit based on the same exact thing. So things are happening in the real estate community. If you're a realtor, you need to understand that this is happening, and you need to start thinking ahead of time. Because look, We talked about the other one that's happening in California.
Going against the teams.
Like, come on. There's going to be a change. And whether we agree with this or not, the argument, it's a sound argument against it. And they're using policies. I mean, they're quoting NAR Code of Ethics, for example, against it. So, I mean, they're not making things up.
Look, and we got to understand this. Regardless of where this lawsuit goes, okay, this dialogue is going to transform the conversations that potential home sellers and buyers are having with agents in their kitchen tables at their houses. Like, the fact that the lawsuit exists threatens to change the industry as we know it.
And as a consumer, for you to tell me that I have to pay 3% of my $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 house to somebody that it's going against me, I'm sorry. If I can get rid of that in any way, shape, or form, as a consumer, just speaking as a consumer, I will do it. And then, if anything, knowing that this is happening, you as the listing agent need to understand or need to have a really well-prepared presentation on why it makes sense, if you agree with this, if you disagree with the lawsuit, why it makes sense for the seller to pay for this commission.
Yeah, now look, so let's talk about this, right? So our podcast is Real Estate of Tomorrow, and we want to empower agents. What do they need to do today to be prepared for real estate of tomorrow? And let's give a couple bullet points. The first thing I think agents need to do today is get educated. Okay. All the research that we've done for this podcast, they need to set up Google alerts. So they're as new articles and whatnot come out, they're on top of it. Okay.
Look, the last thing you want is to go to a listing presentation and for the seller to tell you, yeah, I heard that it's illegal for me to pay for the buyer's commission.
Right.
I'm sorry. If you go, wait, what? Where? You're losing points there, my friend.
I'm sorry. We got to pull our heads out of our asses and be aware of what's going on with this. And so that's the first thing, is to get educated. The second thing is, and you alluded to this, have a valid, documented argument to combat those questions, because whether they come now, 6 months or 6 years from now, they're coming. And we have to stay on top of what's going on with this so we can have an intelligent rebuttal when those questions and objections are brought up to us. Okay. What else can an agent do today to prepare for this world tomorrow?
Look, I think the key is education. I think the key is understanding what's happening right now and what technologies are coming. And I think the key is value. It always comes down to value. What value are you bringing me as the buyer's agent? So if you're a buyer's agent, what value are you bringing me as the listing agent, and why things should be the way they are? And look, the one thing that I think everybody needs to do in every industry right now is to open their mind and to be adaptable. The worst thing you can do right now, and I'm specifically talking to top producers, because this is a top producer mindset, yes, unfortunately. The worst thing that you can do when these types of things come is to say, oh, I paid them no mind. That's fine. I've been doing business like this. They've tried to come for me many, many, many times, and I don't need to reinvent myself. My friends, if you're not retiring in the next couple of years, you need to become adaptable. Because if you're not adaptable, you might not know this yet, but you're extinct. So if you're a top producer and you're listening to this, and you are in more danger than people that are not top producers, because let me tell you something, it's very easy for me to replace 2 or 3 closings a year. It's very, very difficult for me to replace a whole empire that I've created.
Look,
that can go very, very quick.
It's a lot easier to change direction on a speedboat than a cruise ship.
Correct.
And that's just the reality of things. So we have to get educated. We have to prepare intelligent rebuttals. We have to really give thought, like you said, to a value proposition that fits
2022.
Yeah, exactly. Well, MLS access is not a piece of it. And look, a lot of people don't understand this. People, have all these bad sayings about Zillow having access to the MLS. People don't understand that was on the tail end of a DOJ lawsuit where NAR was forced to feed their listings to other platforms besides the MLS. So very, very few people do I speak to understand that you have to get educated as to what's going on. Just like in order for me to survive the mortgage market meltdown, I had to understand what was going on and adapt. And if you don't do that, moving down the road, you are screwed.
Like Gary Vee says, don't be romantic about the old times. You have to be practical. So you need to understand that these are coming. So listen, guys, this is what's happening with the lawsuit right now. We're going to keep you posted with that. We're going to
Yes.
keep you posted as this develops. This is one of many things that are disrupting the market right now.
We could talk about other lawsuits. We could talk about iBars. We could talk about technologies. Like, we have so much great content coming up in future episodes.
Look, one thing that I would really, really like to hear your thoughts on, and we're probably going to do a podcast on this because we have different opinions on this, is who do you think is in more danger here? Who do you think is in danger? Is it the buyer's agent, like Scott thinks, or is it the listing agents, like I think? And I'm curious to see what you guys think, and tune in.
Yeah, guys, listen, if you like this podcast, do me a favor, share the word, subscribe, and watch future episodes. Please spread the word out there, because somebody needs to strip away the bullshit and get the facts out there, and we're going to do it.
We're not selling you anything. We're not asking you for anything. Just let's get educated, and let's do what we need to do today to be the real estate agents of tomorrow.
See ya.
Well, thank you guys for listening. And now it's your turn to implement everything you learned today.
Look, you have a question, you have a topic for a future episode?
Share with us.
Yeah, tell us what you're doing. What are you doing today so you could be successful tomorrow? Send us an email at success@realestateoftomorrow.com.
And don't forget to leave us a review, an honest review.
Screw an honest review. Leave us a 5-star review. And for every 5-star review we get, we're going to send you a badass real estate meme t-shirt.
Those shirts are hilarious.
See ya.